Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be talking about the Reign of Terror, or the radical phase of the French Revolution. Now, the Reign of Terror is just one portion of this radical phase of the revolution. So just to set up some context of why we enter into this radical phase, I want to start with this image you'll see on your screen. This is an image of the bombardment of Lille by the Austrians from September to October in 1792. The Austrians and the Prussians at first were winning. They were being victorious in this war against the French. And this is petrifying the people of France, particularly the people of Paris, as they're watching as the Austrians and Prussians are gradually getting closer and closer to their own city, and they're about to be defeated. This is going to lead to this fear, this great fear of who is our enemies within our country. By this point, that Brunswick Manifesto that was issued by representatives of Prussia and Austria, warning that they would level Paris to the ground if even a hair was touched onto Louis XVI, seems all the more real. Now, by this point in September, Louis XVI has already been imprisoned. They had stormed to the Tuileries Palace the second time and had brought the King Louis XVI, along with his wife and children, had to flee out of the palace, and the only place they could go was to the Legislative Assembly, and then that Legislative Assembly decided to, out of pressure from the people of Paris, to remove him from position of power and to finally imprison him and his family. They were viewed as threats. This is also going to lead to the September Massacre. Now, the September massacres were truly bloody. What's happening during these massacres is pretty much the pressures and fears of the French people, the Parisians, the people living in Paris, of those surrounding them. The fear of outside invasion, the fear of defeat, and word that there are enemies within their own home that are fighting against them. It's going to lead to a mass uprising where the people of Paris themselves are pretty much going about and killing any nobles that they see, any clergy members that are non-jurors, any of the ones that have not yet sworn their allegiance to the French government before the Pope. And also they end up executing any of the people in the prisons that are viewed as enemies to the state, to the Republic. This massacre puts fear in the Legislative Assembly as well, because this is not instituted by the government itself. It's the people of Paris taking the revolution into their own hands. And so this immediately leads to a much more radical phase. And this hysteria in Paris is often considered to be that second French Revolution. And it's really marking the beginning of this much more radical phase. What also occurs at this point is the election of a new national convention by universal suffrage. So who gets to vote in this new election is all men. You do not need to own any property. There's no longer that tiered active and passive citizenship. Any man can vote in this election. And therefore, the voices of those sans-culottes and who aligns with them is going to be the group that will get the most traction because it's a greater portion of the population. So this all overall just leads to a lot of a big shift in power in that National Assembly, now known as the National Convention. And a lot of the reforms made are led by a man named Georges Danton, Danton. He's one of the radical orators of this radical phase of the revolution. He's originally a bit more on the liberal side, and he actually becomes a bit more conservative. But by this point, there are only liberals in the government. So the Girondins, the Jacobins, and the Montagnards, the Mountain, those three parties are all liberal. It just turns out that the Montagnards are the most extreme liberal, the Girondins are the most conservative of the liberals, the Jacobins end up becoming moderate by this phase of the revolution. The pressure on this national convention is coming from the government of Paris itself, the Paris Commune. It's a municipal government that sets up its own Republic of Paris, and by this point, we really can say that the wheels of the revolution centered in Paris really changes the focus there. Now, um, this government is going to be um, much more radical. It's led by Danton, and its goal is to meet. It lasted for 3 years, and it's when France is declared to be a republic. So now what I want to do is just take a moment to go over who are the Girondins, who are the Jacobins, and the Montagnards, what they stand for and how they're different. On the furthest of the far left, we have the Montagnes. In the convention, all of these leaders are Jacobins, but the Jacobins themselves, so the Girondins, Jacobins, and Montagnards, are all traditionally Jacobins. But because of disagreement, we start to see a splitting or factioning of these groups. The Montagnards are representing really the city of Paris's more radical side, and they are sitting on this raised platform. As a result, are known as the Montagnards. The Girondins are sitting on the right and are viewed as more conservative. What they want is they really are fearful of a centralized government. So they are more conservative in our modern sense of a conservative there. They believe in laissez-faire. They favored voting rights based on property ownership because of a fear of the sans-culottes and sort of this mob rule. They also want the king. By this point, remember, a lot of what causes this faction is over what is to be done with this king, who's now in prison. And the Girondins are favoring a trial for the king, and for the king to, at the end of that, to be exiled, but not to be executed. They were considered by the Montagnards to be counter-revolutionary and will be criticized as a result. However, the Girondins thought the sans-culottes are anarchists and too chaotic. In the middle, of course, we have the Jacobins, the traditional party there. They want the king to be tried for treason, and in wanting the king to be tried for treason, the punishment, if found guilty, would indeed be execution. The Jacobins believed in government control for some of the economy. So unlike the Girondins, who wanted to have a laissez-faire, pure laissez-faire economy, the Jacobins were okay with more regulation. The Jacobins also believed that there was a need for a really powerful centralized government in Paris to help fight the counter-revolutionary forces. And they accused the Girondins of secretly supporting the monarchy. And eventually the Jacobins and the Montagnards are going to be coalescing together to really resist and fight against the Montagnards. Now, while all of this is happening, we also have outside of them, as we discussed earlier along the periphery, the sans-culottes. Now, who are these sans-culottes? Why are they called that? Sans-culottes, the word sans-culottes, means without culottes. It's a phrase to refer to the fact that these men and women are too poor to afford the silk stockings that you would wear with your culottes, or as you can see in this image, the popular style of pants at the time is these shortened pants that you would wear with silk stockings, and so instead they had to wear full pants. Now, how it gets translated is without pants in English, and so there's plenty of political cartoons in England at this time mocking the French Revolution by showing the people without wearing any pants whatsoever. But outside of the convention, the sans-culottes are starting to really grow in strength. They feared that the convention itself was too moderate, and they really wanted a direct democracy. These sans-culottes based in Paris, they wanted to have a direct say into all the comings and goings of their government. And the sans-culottes became really the radical revolutionaries. The Girondins are eventually going to be falling to their power. Now, the National Convention, as a body, is existing at a time of war for France, and one way that they are going to actively fight in this war and help spread their own missions and to be victorious is to set out these propaganda decrees to other countries. And so what they start doing in these propagandist decrees is they are trying to assist all those other people who might have revolutionary aspirations. These are declarations that are made by the French government to help promote revolution in other countries. One thing that they promise, for example, in November of 1792, is Fraternité, or sort of universal citizenness to all revolutionaries throughout Europe. And it's a part of this greater movement in France, where in 1792, um, by the end of 1792, France is starting to experience some victories against Prussia and Austria. And so they start occupying new areas of land and inching their way outward. And this is why, all of a sudden, they start to occupy Belgium and Savoy and Mans, these areas that were once Austrian and Prussian territories. William Pitt of England starts to therefore change his mind about the war and start to push for war against France out of fear for his own nation. This is going to lead to, in February, the first coalition made against France. The first coalition is composed of Prussia, Austria, England, Holland, Spain, and Italy. And they're starting this coalition led by England in response to these more recent victories. And all of this is starting to make within France and then without of France different issues and problems. So France now is at war with every nation it's surrounded by, but at the same time it's also at war within its own territory, and this is causing quite the challenge. Now, at the same time as all of this, we have the question of what to do about the king and King Louis XVI. And indeed, the National Convention decides to put Louis XVI on trial, and they give him a trial in which they are the judges and juries. Every member of there will be there. They do give him a trial, and they accuse him of treason. They bring evidence against him, but there is no ability for cross-examination. And he is not allowed to speak. He is allowed to have a jury, a lawyer, but he himself, Louis XVI, is not able to defend himself. And in December of 1792, Louis XVI is going to be executed. 10 months later, Marie Antoinette, in October of 1793, will also be executed. And by 1795, the son of Louis XVI will also die in captivity. Now, what's the significance of the execution of Louis XVI? It's going to affect all the rulers throughout all of Europe. In executing Louis XVI, the French have gone too far. And even if the country was not yet in favor of war and stopping the French Revolution, now they are. The governments of Europe are threatened by this French Revolution officially. It's also going to strengthen the state by restraining enemies within the countries and the emigre. Right, all of a sudden, the state itself is going to be much more centralized. There's no threat to that rule with the king being there, and it also gives new energy to repel the revolution in the satellites. There's much more greater unity to sort of defeat these foes and defeat these threats. Now, in May of 1793. The Girondists are going to start becoming eliminated out of the National Convention. And this is really the major turn for why we have this reign of terror, which is one portion of the radical phase. By May 1793, we're seeing an economic crisis in France, where prices of items are beginning to rise. We're seeing really rapid inflation, and the foreign wars are not going very well. The sans-culottes of Paris feel that it's the Girondins who are betraying them, and they feel betrayed by that convention. And with the support of the Montagnards, the National Guard and the Commune of Paris are going to actually invade the convention and arrest all the Girondin leaders and have them executed. And this is once again furthering that group. And now the Montagnards are officially ruling the entire convention. It's with this that we have the Constitution of 1793 established. Now, the Constitution of 1793 grants universal male suffrage, but that universal male suffrage and voting is going to be suspended until peace could be established, and a revolutionary government will be set up. The sans-culottes overall feel happy about this. They also start abolishing slavery by 1794. Slavery is being abolished in the colonies because of the Haitian Revolution that's occurring there. Overall, though, the truth of the matter is this constitution is never really fully enacted, and instead it's this committee of public safety that ends up ruling the government at this time as a virtual dictatorship. The reason why it gets established is it's viewed that, well, at this time of crisis, it only makes sense to have a, an organization or some kind of body that's there to maintain safety, right? A committee of safety. And its goal is to control everything to protect through terror. So the use of terror for protection. It is a dictatorship. It's emergency legislation. It has 12 members, including its most famous leader, Robespierre, and they control everything. They're going to really begin the reign of terror, and their definition of terror is that it's nothing more than prompt, severe, inflexible justice. And it's the idea that we use fear in order to achieve order and to have victory of the French Revolution over all of our enemies, both within our own country and in the countryside that surrounds it. So they control the representatives, the members of the convention who are on duty with the armies. They're going to be really directing all the military strength there. It's also going to be the war cabinet. The Committee of Public Safety itself serves as the war cabinet. To help win the war, they establish a draft, a levée en masse. By January of 1794, they have an 800,000 men army, which outnumbers the first coalition, so all the other combined armies 4-1. Just to think about the size and scale of this revolution. Now, not only in this levée en masse do they enroll men to fight in the war, they expect that everyone participate in the war effort in some way, shape, or form. So from the youngest children collecting things for the war effort, women who are stitching uniforms, old men and women who are telling old battle stories to help imbue the world with this nationalistic kind of identity. Everyone's directly involved in the war, which helps create much more unity during the Reign of Terror than you might have originally considered. And the war itself becomes the real hero. And as we see greater victories, that's their boost of confidence. It's at this point, too, that the Marseillaise, the French national anthem, Allons enfants de la patrie, le je te crois est arrivé. Contre nous de la tyrannie, les soldats sanglants élevés, les soldats sanglants élevés. And it goes on and on. But pretty much the refrain of the song goes, Aux hommes citoyens, formez vos bataillons. So it's to armed citizens, form your battalions. Marchons, marchons, march, march. Qu'un sang impur, until the impure blood of our enemies waters our fields. It is a bloody national anthem, and yet that's the unity that brings this country together. They also have this law of suspects, and that's actually the scene I'm showing you here. This is a committee of revolutionaires under the terror. What you're seeing is a group where you can bring any kind of suspicion, any group that you might believe is against the revolutionary aspect, against the revolution in any way. You can bring it to one of these small committees, and they can arrange for the execution of that individual. It's called the law of suspects. There is no longer any due process. Justice itself has been suspended in order to have justice, as the views of Robespierre. Now, the Committee of Public Safety becomes the true central administration of this nation. During the Reign of Terror, the Committee of Public Safety is going to also take a much more active and direct role in the economy. So this is a response against the Girondins' desire for laissez-faire. Now we have the economy with a greater use of price controls and more regulation overall on finances. We see a fall in value of this assignats, which was the money there that you see, the money value. And they start to really regulate the food and supplies for the war effort. For example, they say that all patriots should be eating the pain d'égalité, or a loaf using almost completely whole wheat. It was much harder and plainer loaf of bread than the than a more wealthy individual would afford. But if you weren't eating that, you weren't considered loyal to the French rules. They also set what's called the general maximum for prices of goods and wages to help avoid any inflation. So they set a maximum that you can pay for of wages, but also on the cost of bread. And that way, they set sort of a price controls to help the poor in that way. During this time of the Reign of Terror, Robespierre is also going to be spreading this cult of reason or worshiping of the supreme being. Religion itself was viewed to be counter-revolutionary. It was you're putting your nation second to faith, and so there was a movement to de-Christianize all of France. And in order to do this, they established a new calendar as well as a cult of reason. So what you're seeing here is one of these new holidays. So instead of celebrating Christian holidays, we're celebrating here a day celebrating the supreme being. So I'll read the caption above. To inaugurate the new state religion, Robespierre declared that the 20th Prairial of year 2, so note they changed the calendars, that would be June 8th, 1794, but in this case it's year 2, and also the months are now named after just very practical things. So Brumaire means foggy month, and that's the month of November. This would be the first day of a national celebration of the Supreme Being, and future Republican holidays were to be held every 10th day, the day of rest, Décadi, in the new French Republican calendar. Note that now the day of rest is the 10th day of the week. So no longer Sunday is a day of rest. We no longer have that dimanche. The Sabbath day is no longer there. So how can we possibly practice our faith if we don't even know what day of the week it is that we should be going to church? Every locality was mandated to hold a commemorative event, but the event in Paris was designed on a massive scale. The festival was organized by the artist Jacques-Louis David and took place around a man-made mountain on the Champ de Mars. Robespierre assumed full leadership of the event forcefully and to many a bit ostentatiously, declaring the truth and social utility of his new religion. So you see here's the mountain that was a man-made mountain that was built in the gathering of all the people. In this scene here, you see the cult of reason, right? All of the people coming to worship the statue of the supreme being on the Décadi of the Republic of France. If you notice here with this clock, the clock was also tried. Time itself throughout the day was also attempted to be transferred over to a decimalization or decimal time. The metric system, how everything's being base 10, that's coming out of the French Revolution, where we're applying reason to everything. Super rationality. Just to sort of project forward a bit, the Romantic movement that's going to emerge out of the French Revolution is in direct response to this hyper-rationalization and purely using logic, and sort of a counter-response to it. Now, all of those who disagreed with the revolution in any way are going to be getting persecuted. By 1793 to 1794, the convention had no patience for anyone who might disagree with them. And so we have there's a real preaching. For example, a man named Jacques Hebert is a journalist in the Paris Commune who is going to be preaching a hatred of any merchants, bourgeois, any religions, and he's going to really be promoting the execution of many people. Georges Danton is going to have a group of followers that will take on the name Dantonists, and he believed that and he's also going to be leading to the accusation of many people dying. Together, the Hebertists and the Dantonists, they kill about 40,000 people. 8% of them being nobles, 14% bourgeoisie, 6% clergy, and 70% of them are peasants within 9 months. Now, Georges Danton is actually eventually going to believe that the terror is no longer necessary. He decides that, and Robespierre decides that Danton is no longer necessary, and Georges Danton gets executed along with many of the Dantonists. And so this is one example of a phrase throughout the revolution that the revolution it sort of eats its own mother. And that's ultimately what happens to Robespierre as well. By the end of this time, the Robespierre is accusing everyone, and by the end of 1794, it's becoming too much for even for Robespierre, and we have what's called the Thermidorian reaction. Um, there were so many military victories by this point that the people no longer have that same fear and sense of urgency or willingness to be under such a kind of dictatorial rule. And Robespierre is going to be losing the support of the working class, radical revolutionaries, and the Montagne. There's a growing desire to end the violence and repression, enable the moderates to sort of regain control. And overall, the radical Jacobins are going to be overthrown. And a group of convention members are going to actually outlaw Robespierre on July 27th, 1794, which was the date was called the 9th of Thermidor. And Robespierre is going to be executed the following day. And this is called the Thermidorian reaction. And it's out of this that we see the counter revolution movement, where we see it's called the White Terror instead of the Reign of Terror, which was known as the Red Terror. We have the Right Terror, where all these really radical thinkers like Robespierre are getting executed, and this is sort of a de-escalation of the revolution itself.